Good morning, Rechavia Nachlaot. Thank you so much for joining us for our morning Shiur in Tanya, 9:30 to 10. And right now we're going to continue Perek Bet, the second chapter of Tanya. Over the past few days, we've been learning about the uniqueness of the neshama, of the Jewish soul. The neshama is literally a part of Hashem, and it's also tangible. It's something that we can relate to. It's something that we can touch, that we can be part of, and we can bring into our lives. It's not necessarily something removed, something far-fetched. Rather, it's something which is close to us. Yesterday, we started to learn about the concept of the Sfirot. The Sfirot, there are 10 luminaries in Atzilut, and we say that Hashem, Ihu Hakim, it says in the Zohar, He is smart, He is wise, V'la b'chachma yediyah, and not with a knowledgeable type of wisdom. We also learned about the Rambam. The Rambam says, Hu amada, hu ayodea, v'hu ayodua. Hashem is the knower, Hashem is the information, and Hashem is the knowledge which is absorbed after the individual learned the deep subject. And so this is the same concept. This is the same concept of what the Zohar says, that Ihu Chakim v'la b'chachma yediyah. I'd like to make a short introduction to what we're going to learn today. It's a little bit deep. Usually the notes that the Alter Rebbe writes in the small, tiny print are very, very deep. And I'm just going to give a short introduction, and then we'll learn it inside. And then we'll see how it's going to connect to the subject of this chapter. In Chassidut, which elaborates on the teachings of Kabbalah, we have many worlds, we have many Sefirot, we have many levels of godliness, and many levels of emanation of how Hashem reveals Himself to the world. And so to speak, how Hashem encloses Himself, so to speak, into materialistic objects and also all kinds of vessels throughout the different stages in the spiritual galaxy. So let's talk about the general ones. There are 4 worlds: Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Those are the 4 general worlds. Then we have 10 Sfirot, 10 luminaries. Chachma, Bina, Dat, that's the Chabad, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And then 7 levels of emotion: Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzachot, Yesod, and Malchut. Kindness, severity, beauty, victory and eternity, and inner beauty, foundation and connection, and kingship. These are 7 levels of emotion. Now, in every world, for example, Atzilut, which is the highest world, you have 10 levels, these 10 Sfirot. Now, there are many, many millions and trillions and Ein Sof of different levels, how each one is included of the other. Now, if I was to say, in a nutshell, what do all of the Hasidic discourses talk about? What is one, if I had to choose one underlining message that is the common denominator, the thread that literally goes through all of the many thousands of Hasidic discourses from all of the Rebbes, beginning from the Alter Rebbe to our Rebbe, there's one point which brings everything together, and that is as follows. We talk about the worlds, we talk about the Sefirot, we talk about the great levels. In each world, in each level, in each concept, there is one underlining message. That all of these worlds All of these levels are all an emanation of Hashem. And here's the point, here's the punchline, and Hashem himself is much, much higher than these levels. So for example, we'll talk about the world of Bria, which is the second world, the world right after Atzilut. So the Maimer, the Hasidic discourse, is going to explain in great depth the whole idea of Bria, and how Bria is a vessel for Hashem's godliness. That's wonderful. But the punchline of the Maimer is going to be, but Atzilut, the higher world, which is really the highest world, that's totally unified with Hashem. Bria is wonderful, but it has this type of level and that type of level. Excuse me, please. But Atzilut is that's Etzlo, is right near Hashem, is one with Hashem. And you'll have another Hasidic discourse which is going to explain Atzilut, it has 10 kelim and the sfirot and the lights which enclose themselves into the vessels. But at the end of the day, what's the punchline? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is much, much higher than Atzilut. And then you'll have another mimer which is going to tell us about Keter and Ak and all the levels, the Maila Me'atzimtzum. Unbelievable. You go higher and higher and you become all inspired. But what's the punchline? That Hashem himself does not have any color, shape, or form. Hashem is 100% pashut. There's a great line in Hebrew which I mentioned a couple of times. Lo pashut liot pashut. It's, so to speak, not simple to be simple. But in any case, when it comes to the concept of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, pashut sounds a little simple. Sounds a little, pashut. But it's not simple at all. Simplistic. Tamim. Without any ulterior motive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is simple, cannot be defined, cannot be measured in any way, shape, or form. And so that is perhaps the underlining punchline, and in my humble opinion, the deep, powerful message that Chassidus shares with us. If you read the teachings of Kabbalah, it's wonderful, and Chassidus is based on Kabbalah. But one may get a little lost into the nitty-gritty different levels, which are important. Don't get me wrong, they're important. But perhaps maybe missing this line, this beautiful concept that a Chassidus shares with us. That all of these levels are true. They're all an emanation of Hashem. And they're all wonderful. And the more we understand these levels of the Sefirot, the closer we come to Hashem. It is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not in any way belittling it. All I'm saying is, there has to be the ubechen, and therefore, it's wonderful that we have all these levels, and therefore, the punchline is, therefore we understand that Hashem is way beyond, much higher than any level that we can ever imagine. And that is so beautiful. That is such a fascinating concept. And the more you learn, the more Chassidut you learn, the more discourses you learn, you see this point again and again, and each time in its own unique form, in its own unique envelope, in its own unique package. And that is very, very unique. That's very inspiring, and each time you learn a mimer, you become more inspired and more inspired. That's why I encourage everybody to learn as much Chassidut as possible, and to be able to have the zechut of internalizing this amazing concept, which is Ein Sof. There's no limit, there's no end to the brightness and the preciousness, of this message of Chassidut. Having said that, let's look into the Haggah, into the note. So we just finished in the text yesterday, towards the end of the class. We talked about the concept of Chachma. That Hashem's Chachma is not the same type of Chachma as ours. That's what the Zohar says. The Rambam says that he is the knower, He is the information, and He is the knowledge which becomes unified with His mind. It's all in one. By Hashem, it's all in one. By a human being, it's three different stages. First, you have the knower, and you have the information which is removed from the knower, and then the knower learns the information, and then he becomes united, and you have a third product, which is all of them together. But by Hashem, it's all one. You cannot separate between the knower, the knowledge, and the information altogether. So now the Alter Rebbe says, "V'hodu lo chachmei Kabbalah." The wise sages of the Kabbalah have agreed to the Rambam. K'moshe katuv bePardes meharamak, as it says in the book Pardes, which was written by the great tzaddik, the Ramak, the great Kabbalist. V'gam lafi Kabbalat ha'Arizal yetziva milta. Also, according to the Kabbalah of the Arizal, the Holy Arizal, this is a very substantiated statement that the Rambam said. This is connected to the concept in Kabbalah, third line of the note. Besod hitlapshut orein sof baruchu al yidei tzimtzumim rabim bekelim de Chabad da'atzilut. Unbelievable. This is the idea that Hashem, quote unquote, enclothes Himself with many tzimtzumim, many contractions, lower and lower, until He comes to the world of Atzilut. Can you imagine how many tzimtzumim there have to be in order for it to come down here, to this world? It's unbelievable. Ach lo lemala me'atzilut. However, not higher than Atzilut. U'kemoshe katuv b'makom acher, as it's explained, the Kemoshe Be'er b'makom acher, in another place. She'ein sof baruch hu, here's the punchline. She'ein sof baruch hu, that the Almighty God, mirumam u'mitnaseh, is exalted and uplifted, romamot en ketz, levels to no end. Lamala mala mimahut u'bechinat Chabad, much, much higher than the level of Chabad, the way it is in Atzilut. Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Dat. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Listen to this. Ad shemahutu bechinat Chabad nechshevet ka'asiya gufanit etzlo yitbarach. It's unbelievable. To the extent that the essence of Hashem, looking at Chabad, at the highest levels of Atzilut, Chachma, Bina, and Dat, are like asiyah, are like the level of action. Physical, materialistic action. Gufnit etzlo yitbarach. In other words, if you look at a tall building, you look at the at the Israeli towers, from down here, it looks very, very tall. But if you look at it from a bird's view or from an airplane, then it seems like a little ant. Like it seems like a little Lego toy for that children play with. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu is so high, Ein Sof, to no level, infinitely higher than us, even infinitely higher than the Chochma of Atzilut, Chochma, Bina, and Dat of Atzilut, which is the highest world. When Hashem looks down at that, it's like asiyah gufanit. It's like a physical, materialistic object. Do you know what we're talking about? We're talking about the highest level, the most refined, the most delicate, spiritualistic concept that we can even mention. Remember yesterday we were talking about Hashem's Chachma? That Hashem's Chachma is La b'Chachma Yediyah, is not our type of Chachma. We don't even have any imagination of what's the Chachma of Hashem. That's the Chachma of Hashem. But Hashem Himself is infinitely higher than that. This is just an unbelievable concept. It's just fascinating. And so the Alter Rebbe finishes off with a very beautiful statement that we say every day after the Baruch Hu, right after the blessing Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech. We say Marabu. We quote the pasuk in the Tehillim, chapter 104. Kulam bechachma asita. Marabu masacha Hashem. Kulam bechachma asita. So the simple meaning is, Kulam bechachma asita. You created all of the objects in the world bechachma, with wisdom. But according to the Chassidus and the Kabbalah, there's a much deeper interpretation over here of the three words Kulam bechachma asita. Kulam, all of the levels, bechachma asita. Chachma is like asiyah. Chachma, the highest level of Atzilut, is like asiyah, like literal materialistic asiyah action in this world. For Hashem, Hashem is so high that every single thing in the world is like asiyah. Even Chachma is like asiyah. Hashem is so high, is so Ein Sof, is so simplistic, is so pure, is so neutral, if you will. I'm just trying to find a correct adjective, and I don't think any adjective in English can explain how pure Hashem is. That even the highest level of Atzilut, which is Chachma, is like asiyah, is like chorus, is like a very materialistic physical object. So in summary of what we've learned up until now, today, that the neshama of every single Jew comes from the Chachma of Hashem. The Chachma, the wisdom of Hashem, in the Machshava, the thought of Hashem, is totally removed from our grasping, from our understanding. And therefore, in the Chachma of Hashem, you have enclosed the Etzem, the essence of Hashem, because Chachma is the highest level. That's why it's called Yesh Me'ayin, Kulam V'achachma Me'ayin Timatzeh. The Chachma comes from Ayin. The Chachma is the highest, the closest level that it can come to the Ayin, to the nothingness. Hashem, which for us is nothingness, is just so simplistic. There's no way that we can identify. There's no way that we can verbalize the greatness of Hashem. And this is the neshama of you and I. We contain within ourselves the essence of Hashem, atzmut, the essence of Hashem. All of the other levels don't come anywhere near to Hashem's greatness. I really hope, Ezrat Hashem, I was able to convey this tremendously deep concept in a nutshell to you, in order that we should be able to learn this so beautifully and hopefully to continue. Now let's go back to the text of the Alter Rebbe. This is only 7 lines from the bottom, in the narrow lines. If you're following along in your own Tanya at home, chapter 2, Perek Bet, it starts with Chule, Chaf Vav, that's the beginning of the line. V'davar zeh, and this concept, Ein biyacholet ha'adam lahavino al buryav, Chulu, buryo. A person, a human being, does not have the ability to be able to grasp, to be able to understand this properly. Kidichtiv, as it says in the verse, in the prophet, Hacheker Eloka Timtza. If someone will investigate Hashem, will you find it? Will you be able to understand Hashem? Will you be able to grasp Hashem? No way. Uktiv, and it says in the verse, which we quoted in our class this past Shabbos, we started Baruch Hashem according to the instruction of the Chabad rabbis that we could open a shul, but not the shul itself, not yet. We davened outside right near the shul, and we're looking forward to seeing everybody also this week. We had a beautiful shiur right before davening early in the morning, and this is the verse that we quoted from the prophet, Uktiv, and it says in another verse, Ki lo machshavotay machshavotechem v'gomer. My thought, Hashem says, is not your thought. In other words, we have, when we say machshava, thought, so we right away associate it with the power to be able to think and process different concepts in our mind. That's the connotation that we think that machshava is. But real machshava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is totally beyond that. There's no way in the world that we can ever categorize, that we can ever express, that we can appreciate Hashem's machshava. So if anybody thinks that they're a wise guy to understand why Hashem does this, or why Hashem does that, or if someone thinks that they're going to understand why Hashem brought the corona to the world, and why Hashem did the Holocaust, and all these different things which are so hard for us to understand, and we dedicate this class again to the memory of Mrs. Zucker, who unfortunately she suffered for a year and a half with a terrible sickness. How could it be that a young mother with 8 little children, that she passes away? We think that we're so smart that we understand everything, and therefore we get agitated when we don't understand something. But when we realize that the real concept of machshava, of thought, of chachma, is really by Hashem, and the little minute, little quarter of a percent of nothingness that we are, nothingness of our minds are so finite, are so coarse, that how could we ever try to even imagine that we could understand Hashem's ways? It's like 2 different directions, north and south, totally different concepts, 2 extreme different concepts. It's like the story of the Alter Rebbe, that the Alter Rebbe was once sitting around before he became the Rebbe. He was a student, he was the youngest student of the Maggid, Rabbi Dovber of Mizrich. And he and the other students were sitting around the table. The Rebbe wasn't there. And they were discussing the difficult poverty and the suffering and the pogroms that Am Yisrael was going through in Europe at the time. And they went around the table, and each one of them suggested that if they were God, if they were Hashem, then how they would restructure the suffering of Am Yisrael. And when it came time, when it came around the table and it came to the Alter Rebbe, was the last one, the Alter Rebbe said, if I was Hashem, I would leave it exactly the way it is now. We may not understand why Hashem does things and how it could be good. Could sometimes look even cruel. But we have to remember that there's no way in the world that we can ever understand Hashem's real thought. Who even knows, even when Mashiach comes, if we'll be able to understand? It says that when Mashiach comes, we're going to say, Otcha Hashem ki anafta bi. Thank you, Hashem, for persecuting Am Yisrael. So first of all, it doesn't mean that we're going to understand why it was good. We're going to say thank you. We'll realize perhaps that it was good. More than now. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. We'll find out soon, hopefully, this minute. But one thing the Rebbe said clearly, I remember when I was a child, 7 years old, the Rebbe cried. I was listening to the live hookup online, on the phone. And the Rebbe cried. It was Chol HaMoed Sukkot. And the Rebbe said, true that when Mashiach comes, we're going to thank Hashem for persecuting us. But we're not allowed to think about that now. Because if a person thinks about the fact that we're going to thank Hashem for persecuting us, and now in the final moments before Mashiach comes, then we're not going to ask for, we're not going to beseech by Hashem to bring Mashiach now. Because we'll be complacent. We'll say, oh, you know what? It's okay that Hashem is persecuting Am Yisrael. God forbid. When Mashiach comes, we'll thank Hashem. That's not for now. Because Mashiach is not here yet. Please God, this second Mashiach is going to come. But until he comes, we're not allowed to be complacent in the galut. We're not allowed to say, okay, it's okay that Am Yisrael is quote-unquote not at our father's table, not at the king's table, not in the king's palace. We are right here in Yerushalayim, but unfortunately Yerushalayim does not always run according to the way Hashem would want. And the Beit HaMikdash is not built. We don't yet see the glory of Hashem. Am Yisrael is still suffering. And we have to bring an end to that. We have to bring Mashiach now. We cannot be complacent until Mashiach comes. And therefore, we're going to summarize today's lesson that HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his essence is much, much higher than any level that you can ever imagine. And his machshava and the chachma, the thought and wisdom that he does have, is also Ein Sof. It's a different concept. It's a totally different concept. In other words, when we approach Chassidut and Kabbalah, we have to come with a real bittul. We have to come with a real selflessness, because we are being taught new concepts. We are being taught about HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Not only about the different levels, the many levels that there are in the emanation of godliness. We're primarily learning about HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. When we learn about Hashem, we realize that how little we are, and how grateful we need to be that Hashem has chosen us, that we can be the chosen nation, and we can be a light to the world. We can accomplish all of the mitzvot and learn so much Torah, and to connect to the infinite, to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Thank you so much for joining us. Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning, same time, same place.